Okay. Order, order. We're still in hybrid settings, as members will have noted, and Mr. Speaker's asked me to remind all colleagues that they are expected to remain for the entire debate. I must also remind members participating virtually that they must leave their camera on for the duration of the debate, and that they will be visible at all times, both to each other and to us here in the Boothroyd room. If members attending virtually have any technical problems, they should email the Westminster Hall Clerk's email address, which is westminsterhallclerks@parliament.uk. Members attending physically should clean their spaces before they use them, and also clean them prior to leaving the room. I would also like to remind members that Mr. Speaker stated that masks should be worn throughout the debate here in Westminster Hall, the Boothroyd room. Members attending physically who are in the latter stages of the call list should use the seats in the public gallery and move onto the horseshoe when seats become available. Members can only speak from the horseshoe where there are microphones, and there are no interventions virtually, only physically. So thank you for your attention. Jonathan Gullis to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered E-petitions 300010 and 300025 relating microchipping of pets, known as FIRS law and Tux law. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr. Pritchard, and today we debate an issue that will be close to the hearts of many members, their families, as well as the millions of pet owners around the country. As the proud father to Bella, my Cabochon, and Bailey, my Cavapouchon, the thought of ever losing them is something that horrifies me. I did have a scare recently when I was walking Bella at Bathpool Park in Kidsgrove for her first birthday. Something spooked her and she ran off, leaving my partner and I frantic as we searched for her. 3.5 hours later, and with the support of the incredible Greyhound Gap team led by the tenacious Lisa Cartwright, she was found, shaken but well. Pets are more than just animals. They really are members of the family, and when they go missing, the other family members are left devastated. Before I start, I want to thank all those who have given up their time to help me prepare for today. Thank you to the Ferns Laws team, which comprises of Debbie Matthews of Vets Get Scanning and the Stolen and Missing Pets Alliance, Dr. Daniel Allen of Kill University and Pet Theft Reform, Mark Abraham OBE of the All Parliamentary Dog Advisory Welfare Group and Lucy's Law, Sarah Dixon of Focus on Animal Law and Flop Not Crop, and Freya Woodhall, founder of Let's Get Willow Home. And thank you to Dawn Ashley, Sue Williams and Dominic Dyer, animal welfare campaigners and members of the Tux Law campaign. As well as thank you to all those campaigners who have been working tirelessly to support bereaved pet owners and to bring microchipping to the attention of this place. I will take the two petitions in turn and will try to keep the two petitions clearly separate, as they are distinct issues, albeit both relating to microchipping. Starting with Fern's Law, which is calling for it to be made compulsory for vet practices to scan a pet when it is presented for the first consultation or at its yearly checkup. The campaign, known as Vets Get Scanning, was started by Debbie Matthews after her 2 Yorkshire Terriers, Gizmo and Widget, were stolen from her car in 2006. Within the first 24 hours, Debbie found out that the police regarded the theft of her dogs as not important enough to attend the scene, saying, "As it's only dogs, we won't come out." Thankfully, with the help of her father, Sir Bruce Forsyth, Debbie was in a position to launch a major campaign to get her dogs back, and the people who had brought Gizmo and Widget back came forward just after 1 week. But for many owners, there isn't a happy ending. And sadly, because pet theft is a low-risk, high-reward crime, it is on the rise. The scale of the problem is clear. There are roughly 20,000 dogs and cats listed on Dogs Lost as missing. Debbie named her campaign Fern's Law after a stray Cocker Springer Spaniel was stolen from her home in Malden, Surrey in April 2013 and was only reunited in 2019. Fern was in a pretty sorry state, having been used for breeding during those 6 years. After a veterinary checkup, there was evidence that Fern had been taken into a vet for a medical procedure during that time. But because it isn't compulsory for vets to scan dogs for microchips when they are first presented, Fern was not reunited with her family for years. This was a missed opportunity. How many other dogs and cats have been lost this way? It was only when Fern was abandoned and a kind soul brought her into a vet as a stray that she was reunited with her owners. This is one of the contradictions of the issue. It seems that vets are happy to scan dogs brought in as strays, but sold on and kept by finding missing dogs and cats who have a new keeper present are not always scanned. It takes the same amount of time to scan a dog brought in as a stray and one brought in by an owner, so why can't vets do this by default? The other contradiction is that since 2016 it has been compulsory to have your dog microchipped. Microchips are sold to owners as a permanent marker with traceability and a way to discourage pet theft, and the best way to be reunited in cases where pets are stolen. But what is the point if microchipping is designed to reunite missing pets when it is not compulsory for vets to scan them at a pet's first veterinary treatment? DEFRA have held a consultation on making cat microchipping compulsory, but again, what is the point if vets and others aren't going to have to scan them? Many missing pets are never reunited with their families because it's left as optional to scan and check microchip registration on the original database to make sure pet and keeper match. If just one organisation is not committed to scan and check microchip registration, the whole system fails and is not fit for purpose. The Ferns Law campaigners want to see legislation to replace the current best practice recommendations from the British Veterinary Association, which, although they have been strengthened, are only optional guidelines. As Mark Abraham, OBE, said to me, vets are missing a trick by not scanning dogs as standard. It is not a complicated procedure to scan a dog. It does not need to be done by a vet. The receptionist could do it while the owner is waiting in reception. It seems like a no-brainer to me, and I very much hope that following their consultation, DEFRA will be making it compulsory for veterinarians to check microchips. Moving on to the next petition, Tuck's Law. The petition has been started to make it a legal requirement that no healthy animal can be destroyed by a vet without first scanning the pet's microchip, to confirm the person requesting euthanasia has the authority to do so, and that the dual registration contact detail, i.e. an animal rescue and owner, on the microchip is contacted and honoured. The campaign is named after Tuck, a 16-month-old rescue who was euthanised in December 2017. He was not scanned prior to euthanasia, and his rescue backups were not contacted or notified of his death. This is an important point. Typically, animal rescue microchip pets in their care at the time of carrying out essential healthcare treatments, such as vaccinating and spraying or neutering. This usually occurs when new owners have been found for the pet, and so the details registered for microchips belong to the rescue. Once animals are rehomed, rescues remain a presence in their life, offering rescue backup to new owners for the duration of the pet's life. They remain on hand for advice, and should owners no longer be able to cope or care for the pet, the rescue's contract typically stipulates the pet's return to their care, where they will find alternative care. Tuck had full rescue backup details on his microchip, and yet he was euthanised despite this, and despite being presented by an individual who was not his registered keeper. As I said above, our pets become family members, and the thought of what happened to Tuck happening to one of my dogs is truly horrific. The Tuck's Law petitioners shared details with my team of some tragic cases where pets were taken in by neighbours who had them euthanised simply because they didn't like them or by the way they behaved. The youngest dog mentioned was only 6 months old. From what I'm told, 98% of vets have been presented with a healthy pet to be euthanised simply for behaviour. Tuck's Law asks that vets are compelled to scan microchips and contact the registered keeper and rescue backups when a healthy and treatable animal is presented to them for euthanasia to prevent harrowing cases like Tuck's ever happening again. I was pleased to hear that progress on this has been made, and the BVA has worked with the campaign and government to strengthen its guidance to vets. The new guidance, which underpins the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Code of Professional Conduct, advises that veterinary surgeons should scan for a microchip in dogs prior to euthanasia where, in their professional judgment, destruction of the dog is not necessary on animal health or welfare grounds. This is a welcome change, but the Tuck's Law campaign argue that it does not go far enough. They argue that the new code needs to be publicised and enforced to save many dogs' lives. The petitioners make it clear that action is needed quickly because there is a ticking time bomb coming down the road. During the pandemic, we were all required to stay home, and quite reasonably, many people got a pet, I myself included, to help them cope with the sudden dislocation from their normal lives. However, having a dog that needs walking every day is easy enough when you're being told by the government to stay at home. It is less easy when you need to be in the office again from 9 to 5. It is estimated there are close to 1.5 million dogs that were adopted or brought during the pandemic. As life returns to normal, many owners will realise they cannot care for their dogs properly anymore, and campaigners are seriously worried that as a result, many healthy dogs will be brought in for euthanasia. Dominic Dyer from the Tux Law campaign says it's expected this will be even worse than the 2008 financial crash, which led to many families realising they could no longer care for their dog. I recognise that the BVA has concerns about making Tux Law a legal requirement. They argue that it could be inadvertently create problems not only for the veterinary profession, but also for pets and owners that it seeks to protect. However, as Dominic made clear, we are on the cusp of potentially many thousands of dogs being given up by their owners, and I'm concerned that the current guidelines may not be strong enough. An issue identified by both sets of petitioners is the need for a centralised database of microchipped pets. Currently, there is a complicated situation where there are 16 different national pet microchip databases recognised by DEFRA. Most databases offer the availability of a quick microchip database search. The technology already exists to achieve a centralised database. One only has to consider the centralised database for motor insurance, and I think Dr. Sharon Alston, who was kind enough to share her experience of working on such a system for microchipped animals in Ireland in the build-up to today's debate. A centralised database would be available to the police, vets, authorities and rescues to access the microchip registration easily and provide quick reunifications. The present system makes it much harder for owners to be reunited with their pets, even in cases where vets do scan, but it does work. The British Veterinary Association also recognises the lack of a centralised database is a key stumbling block for vets trying to reunite lost or stolen dogs. I understand that they were asked by Debbie if a centralised database would be the key to compulsory microchip checks. The answer was no. Referring to GDPR and reporting scanned missing pets, there would not be a breach for RCVS and BVA if the details are requested by the police as part of an investigation triggered by a report to the microchip database by the veterinary clinic. It seems that there is a misconception that the obligation to report to the police falls on vets. It does not. The obligation to report rests on the chipping companies who will contact the registered keeper. I've probably gone on for long enough now, Mr. Pritchard, at this point, so I'm eager to hear what other members have to say about these two petitions. All I will add is that the Battersea Cats and Dogs Home and the Kennel Club have given their support to both of the petitions that have taken place. And as I've made very clear, I'm certainly a supporter of Fern's Law, having been someone who firmly believed that every time I took my dogs to the vets, they were already being scanned and checked. So the fact that isn't happening is something that's gravely concerned me and something that my veterinary practice has been delighted that I've become educated on following the emails that I've sent to make sure that this never happens again. And to also add on to my support that I would like to believe that vets in any circumstances would already check microchips before euthanising a dog. I believe that the vast majority of veterinarians would do such a thing. I don't believe that there is a mass amount of people disobeying the rules and guidance set to them. So I would say that whilst Tux Law absolutely should be taken into consideration, I like to believe in the good of human spirit, and that being that vets are doing the correct and appropriate things before ever having to do something as hard in their profession as putting down an animal, whether that be one that is sick or one that is well. So before I wrap up, I just want to say I'm really pleased to see the Minister here today to respond on behalf of DEFRA and obviously to the Shadow Minister as well, and look forward to hearing both of their responses, and I look forward to hearing the outcome of the consultation, and hopefully that will be in the very near future. Thank you, Mr. Pritchard.
The question is that this House has considered E-petitions 3010 and 3025 relating to microchipping of pets. Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and what a pleasure it is to hear my honourable friend, the member for Stoke East, I think it is, Stoke-on-Trent East, North, sorry, for his introduction. Whenever we come to Westminster Hall for debates, it's either himself or the honourable member for Ipswich that introduces these petitions, so it seems to be a week about, but it's always a pleasure for Ireland to be here in Westminster Hall. Can I just say, I've owned a dog probably all my life. I can't remember never having had a dog from a very early age in Ballywalter in the 60s as a young boy. And I can remember the first dog we had. I can remember the last dog we had. So dogs are very much part of my life. This is an issue with which my mailbox has taken a hit. The reason is that there are so many people have support this petition. There's so many people who perhaps maybe didn't even reply to the petition but support the principle of where we are, and I think it's important that we have that opportunity. It's not very often, Mr. Chairman, that I'm number 2 in the debate in Westminster Hall. As a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time I was, but I was very pleased to see the Shadow Minister arriving. For 1 minute I thought I was going to be the only person here in opposition, but not quite when the other gentleman arrived. I'm pleased to see him in his place as well. Whilst it's introduced to this petition numbered just 60 in my constituency, there were many, many others who wished to be part of this and had contacted me as well. The theft of dogs across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has been enormous this year. I don't know whether it was in COVID-19 where people needed to have a dog as a pet, whether it was when their contact with the outside. And the great thing about a dog is that a dog will always love you. I mean, it always wags its tail. It always will respond to your affection. And even when you're cross, if you're then turn on the charm again, the dog will wag its tail, and that's what a dog does. But across the last year, and some of the examples I had in my constituency were Cocker Spaniels, for instance. Last year were making about anything from £300 to £500. This year they're making anything from £1,500 to £2,000. So there has been a criminal aspect to this, in which the Honourable Gentleman for Stoke and Trent North referred to, and I'm very, very conscious that the criminals, as they always do, seem to take advantage of someone's vulnerability in relation to this. So for many of us, our dogs are our best friends. My dog will be the one loving creature in my life that does not disagree with me. He doesn't huff with me, and that will always offer unconditional love. I've been so grateful for Autumn, my wife's Springer Spaniel, when I've come home from an arduous week at Westminster, to see the pure joy that the dog has for me. I can't say that Sandra, my wife, is just as happy to see me on every occasion, no. Mr. Chairman. Well, I say that in jest because I know for a fact she is. She may just not always express it as forcefully as a dog does, you know. But that's by the way. The bond that comes from this relationship is unshakable, and the thought of ever coming home and not seeing that wee tail wagging away is welcome is truly a difficult one to consider. Our dog Autumn was a rescue dog. It was someone had unfortunately had been bad to it, and we brought it home to our house, and really the dog had settled in well, and the nervousness and maybe the vulnerability it had at the beginning is all away, thank goodness. I probably, because it was a Springer Spaniel, I was very pleased to take it out shooting with me, so it's now become my hunting dog. It's my wife's dog, but it's my hunting dog, and which I use on occasions during the shooting season. How much more so for those who live alone and whose little cat or dog is their sole companion. Have the distressed constituents ringing my office who are at their wits' end searching for their lost cat, who cannot get help. And when I contact my local council, who are always, by the way, very responsive and very compassionate and truly wonderful, they are often unable to help as they do not have the policy of scanning cats. This has not helped to alleviate the distress of the family, and this is why I support these petitions that are before us today, as I know that everybody else will endorse that. And according to figures from the Cats Protection Cats and their stats, they said some 2.6 million cats across the UK within a microchip. This represents 26% of own cats. My wife has 3 cats. With one stage with 6 cats. When the 3 passed away, we didn't replace them. But my wife has worked in an animal charity for some time, and now she works in a cattery. Cats can roam freely, and they're not known for and are known for their inquisitive nature. Although we have 2 cats who are house cats, and we have 1 cat who will hunt night and day. And we live on a farm, so therefore we want all the cats to hunt and keep the rats and mice under control, which can lead to them becoming lost or injured. And we've had quite a few we've lost on the road, Mr. Chairman. Within a microchip, an own cat may never be united with its owner. If a cat is sadly killed on the road, a microchip allows an owner to be informed and have closure. And if a cat is stolen, a microchip gives the owner the best chance of being reunited. If cats were all microchipped, as with dogs, it would prevent the euthanizing of owned and loved cats. That's why I add my voice to the call today once again, which the Honourable Fin for Stoke and Trent North referred to in his introduction. As the APPT on dog welfare has clearly stated, although it's compulsory for the public to microchip dogs, it is only optional for vets, professionals, authorities and rescues to scan and check microchip registration, with new potentially stolen dogs not being scanned and checked at first vet consultation. The opportunity to identify and reunite thousands of stolen dogs has been missed. I know the government has given a commitment. There's been lots of questions the members have asked in relation to this. I know the government has given a commitment, and there's been some success stories in certain parts, maybe the Midlands. It just shows how a dog is stolen in Kent can end up in Birmingham very, very quickly. So there is a network of criminality there in place. The flawed microchipping system does not provide any peace of mind whatsoever to families experiencing dog or cat theft. So the microchipping of all animals, dogs and cats, for me is absolutely essential. It is clear we have an opportunity to put this right, and Fern's story and subsequent campaign highlights how something which would take a mere minute of a vet's time can reunite families and create healing to a devastated heart. And for those that I know who their dog and their cat's an absolute treasure of their life, it's their constant companion. For many, not knowing if their wee pet is wandering about sick or in pain is worse than knowing that they are gone. And we can implement a reform that may take this uncertainty for many. So I look very much forward, as I always do, to the Minister and her responses. I'm very convinced that the Minister is a lady who understands what we're saying and responds in a very, very positive way. These simple changes, which are not onerous, can make great steps in animal welfare. And I'm very proud to add my name to this debate today to support my honourable friend for Stoke and Trent North and others who will speak and who are saying something can be done, and the fact is we must do it now. Thank you.
Stephen Duncan-Smith.
Pritchard, it's a pleasure to serve under your stewardship, and can I congratulate my honourable friend for his success in bringing this, I think, rather important issue to the public gaze, and here in Parliament, of course, where we are charged with setting the laws and ensuring that they are properly policed. Can I say that I fully agree with those petitions, and I also agree with the sentiment behind them. They are focused on chipping dogs and reading them. So it's compulsory to have your dogs chipped, but it's not compulsory, which I discovered to my surprise during lockdown, was not compulsory to scan them. And it was only the discovery of that led me to ask some further questions, and many of the names of the people that my honourable friend has raised, including Debbie and others, showed me that this was literally incoherent, that we have an obligation on owners to chip, but not on the vets to scan them. And the answer to the question is, what's the point of chipping them if only the honest people in society are the ones that get checked? And that's the answer. So we need to have that made obligatory. We also need, he's quite right, that the number of different databases, between 14 and 16 separate databases, we need to do something about making sure that essentially available and read so that we know who's the original owner of this, and therefore all the things that my honourable friend talked about, which I won't repeat, about who makes the decision about whether a dog's put down or not, etc. These are all the right people, the people that actually originally owned the dog and had the say-so on it. I want to draw attention to the House to report stage of the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill, where I and my honourable friend, the member for Norfolk, rather for Ipswich, have put down 3 new clauses to that bill. Clause 14 requires the sale of pets by cheque or bank transfer, which basically bans cash sales. New clause 15 makes it compulsory that pets must be microchipped to be scanned by vets and check that the microchip number is registered on an approved database and confirm the correct registered keeper. That's new clause 15. And new clause 16 making the offence of pet theft a specific category of a crime carrying a much more significant fine and or incarceration. So I want to come back to this idea. So microchipping is important because it's necessary to understand who is the owner. And I say that because there has been a staggering increase in crime with regards to particularly dogs, but pets in general. We know, as has been said already, that during the lockdown, many people who had never had a pet suddenly realised they had more time on their hands and they wanted a pet. So the demand went up. But of course, supply was unable to keep up with that, legitimate supply, for the very simple reason that the legitimate breeders were not able to come across and take dogs and bitches together and to produce legitimate litters. So what you were left with was the criminal fraternity, and they did 2 things. One is you then get the increase in puppy farms. Disgusting state of affairs. You get people, a bitch will be stolen from somebody, and then she will be used for constantly producing young puppies until she's worn out within a matter of about a year, 6 months to a year, and then they go and have that bitch put down, or they just abandon that bitch onto the street. And this is really, really important. For those who care about this, this is not just a political game. This is very serious. This is about unnecessary pain and a terrible life led to those animals that have been taken by these criminals. The second part of this is we see the increase is enormous. The BBC reported a 250% increase in dog theft crimes in Suffolk alone during the course of the pandemic, and that compared July 2019 to July 2020. The Metropolitan Police report the highest number of dog thefts in the country, and the number of stolen dogs registered on the Dogs Lost website increased by 170% from 2019 to 2020, and 2020 is one of the worst years ever for stolen dogs, for dog napping. Okay, that's bad enough in itself, that there is theft, and that's a crime, theft of people's pets, not just property, by the way, which is where the law falls down again. These are pets. They are more than just property. You know, I might own this chair, but this chair doesn't greet me in the evening when I come back, doesn't console me when there's a problem. It just sits there. The dog is a sentient being, and therefore it has greater value than just an object, and it's time we brought that up to speed. But the problem is the prices have rocketed, and my honourable friend spoke about those earlier on. 134% for chows, £2,000 in October compared to £1,000 in the previous March. And then here's the other bit, which is that you have now these pets like French bulldogs. They can be over £5,000 a time, and a litter can be over £30,000 to those who then use them to breed. So the problem isn't, again, now just criminality. It's not, again, just violence, because they use violence to steal their dogs and they target dogs to order. This is now an increase in violent crime. And here's the problem. It's gone to the gangs. Now, I live in an area we have real problems with street gangs in northeast London. Police work hard on it, and so does the local authority. I make no criticism of them. But they now see it as easier, cheaper, and less of a problem to steal a pet like a French bulldog and sell it on for cash, rather than trying to sell drugs on the corner of the street, because selling drugs gets them into much greater trouble, leads to also great violence themselves, and therefore it becomes a bigger problem. Why wouldn't you steal one of these valuable pets and sell it? You might get a £250 fine. I mean, they are just laughing their heads off about this. This is now valuable merchandise with no real criminal penalty, and therefore why wouldn't they be doing it? And that's one of the reasons why the violence on these thefts has increased dramatically. Because what the hell do you care if you smash somebody to the ground, hurt them, particularly normally elderly people, take their dog? We've heard stories of people being stamped on, their hands being smashed, taken off the lead, sometimes knives used, all sorts of stuff, because these pets now have a significant cash, and I say cash, value, because cash is the key here, which is why we want to ban the use of cash. It had a massive effect on the stealing of lead, on churches and others when they banned the cash levels, the scrap merchants. This is the other angle of attack. So I simply say to my honourable friend, I absolutely support what he has said about microchipping. It is but, however, one element of what has to happen with regards to pets. We need to bring this up to date. There are far too many people out there who are really worried about this. And when we come here, I know what goes on in ministries. I've had 6 years in a department, and I know what civil servants say. Oh, Minister, this is really a second-order issue. There are many more important things we've got to focus on. Big things, always big things that we have to deal with. I say there is no greater issue than the thing that affects our constituents' lives and worries them and leads to criminality, violence, and a loss of the legitimate property of a dog or a pet or a cat or whatever. And I think it's time, therefore, to make this not a second-order issue, but a first-order issue. And I say to my honourable friend, this issue has been kicked around between the different departments. I know that the Lord Chancellor is speaking to people in the next couple of days, so he takes an interest in it. I know that the Home Secretary spoke to me and she took an interest in it, and I know now that my honourable friend's department takes an interest in it. I simply say, can we please make sure that the government recognises that whoever owns this, we all own it collectively as a parliament, not even as a government. We own it because we owe it to our constituents to save them from any further problems with this regard, any further violence, ever further threats, and the theft of pets. I am a dog owner myself. Like many others, I would hate the idea that my wife or somebody else was smashed to the ground, beaten up, and that pet was stolen. And by the way, my wife has just stepped down from being the head of the trust of the medical detection dogs, who are the ones at the moment doing work on detecting COVID, brilliantly, by the way, as high as any of the tests and immediate. These are very valuable animals, and they're animals that save our lives, like the ones that look at the aircraft and sniff the aircraft to check there are no bombs, or check for illegal currency, or who come round here and tell us we're all safe because they run round the benches. These are not items. They are owned by people and pets, but they're also incredibly powerful. They save our lives. Now is the time to act, I say to my honourable friend. Please relay that back to all the government departments. Let's get on with this. Let's do what's right and help our constituents.
We now go virtual. Andrea Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and also follow my honourable friend and all the members who've spoken so far so passionately on this subject. This topic is a topic that's close to my heart. I want to take you back to the hazy days of 1986. Shadow was our family dog, and a beautiful Labrador cross, adorable, a real gentle soul. We also had a mother, Susie. One day I remember coming home from school aged 12, and she was missing from our garden. We contacted the police, the animal rescue centres, the council, but she was never found again. So I know what it's like when dogs go missing. We felt real anguish as a family, as most of us who have pets know, our animals are part of our family. We had real grief and loss, not ever knowing what happened to her. Now, had microchipping been available then, we would have had a better chance of finding her. Now, I believe, Mr. Chairman, it was first introduced into our country in 1989. That was just 3 years after we lost our dog. Now, according to the RSPCA, it's estimated that there are 51 million pets across 12 million households across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. Now, with 44% of all households owning pets, including mine, I now have a mini Schnauzer called Godiva and a rescue dog called Susie. Mr. Chairman, we are a nation of animal lovers. We cherish our pets, and in my constituency of Morley and Outward especially so. We have an annual dog show, we have the fantastic College of Animal Welfare, the RSPCA Rescue Centre, Cat Protection Rescue Centre, and the Whitehall Dog Rescue Centre, where I got my own rescue dog, Susie, from. Now, over the course of the past year, we've seen our pets have become indispensable for so many people, especially in supporting people when they've got mental and physical health challenges. And this is one of the reasons that the welfare of our pets matter to us, and why responsible dog owners will ensure their pets are microchipped. These petitions call for 2 measures to be introduced, which we've already mentioned, had mentioned earlier, but I'll touch on a couple again. Firstly, that vets must scan microchips for animals brought into them in order to combat pet theft, which we know is on the rise across the country. And second, that they call on vets to scan for microchips prior to performing euthanasia on any animal, to ensure that the owner is the person who has brought the pet in and guarantees that they are aware of the situation. I'm proud to support both these measures and all the measures that my honourable friends and members across the House have spoken about today. The measures in these petitions, if enacted into law, will help to reduce the suffering that both animals and their families face. They will ensure that animals can be reunited with a family that cares for them, and ensure that families can take comfort in knowing that everything possible has been done to help reunite them with their pets. They will guarantee that owners can fear less that if something has happened to their pets in the saddest of circumstances, it maximises the chances that they will be there when to say their final goodbye. These measures are pure in their intentions, Mr. Chairman, and I would urge the government to look seriously at these proposals to further strengthen the great work that we are already doing as a government in recent years on animal welfare. Thank you.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here under your stewardship. Not so much for the member for Stoke-on-Trent North who's brought this here, because unfortunately he's going to listen to me for the next couple of minutes talk about my own pets. But I think it's really important, because actually that's what humanises this whole debate in the first place. Now, this is one of the easiest speeches I ever have to give, coming in for 18 months talking about my 2 pets, Roo and Ada, 2 very silly whippets. The first was bought before the first lockdown. In the same week that Michelle Roo died, we got Roo, a grey, very small, very tiny, very meek whippet. She's joined me. She was supposed to be for my wife's dog while I was away down in Westminster. Of course, we went straight into lockdown, and Rue joined me at my feet, at my beck and call, every single day during those phone calls at 6 in the morning till 11 at night, dealing with my constituents in the pandemic. Rue was there. My only break to go and get a drink, to feed, to let her out and to take her for a walk, and she was my companion. Of course, that meant a problem, because that dog was supposed to be my wife's, so we had to get a second. And the second came in the form of Ada. Named after Ada Lovelace for two reasons. She has a great big heart literally on the side of her chest, but also Ada Lovelace has a special place in my constituency of Bosworth. And since then, Ada is a complete opposite to the meek Rue. She is tenacious, she is grunty, she's only got one gear and it's forward. And this is problematic. When I go out across the fields of Leicestershire, Ada and Rue head out and leave me for dust. They are whippets by name, because if you have a whippet, they are digital animals. They are either on or off. Most people say when you have a whippet, you don't own one, you wear one. They're on the sofa, they're around your neck, they're lying in your lap. But when you take them out, it's a different kettle of fish. I'm very lucky to have the fields of Desford, Peckleton and New Bolverden all at my beck and call, and the dogs love to run across them. The problem is they'll spot children and other dogs on the other side of the fields and be gone. The good news is mine is so meek I'm yet to see a dominant display at any point, usually ending in them rolling over and showing their tummy. They are fantastic escape artists, whippets. They're brilliant at diffusing all my ways of keeping them in the garden, from chewing through chicken wire to leaping 6-foot fences. But of course, this is the cut and thrust of what we're talking about, because very easily they can escape. And should they escape, they can disappear. If they can disappear, they can be lost. And unfortunately, as we tragically heard, lost forever, with my right honourable friend's dog, Shadow, from Morley and Outwood. Now, there are about 8.5 million dogs chipped in the country. And I like to think most of them have good homes. So that's at least 8.5 million people looking after this. But of course, they're family animals. And that's why this matters. This debate really cuts through to who we are. And the Honourable Member from Chingford and Woodford Green has hinted at exactly that and given many stats about how actually not only is this the soft underbelly of the emotional aspect of the UK, but also leads to the harder crime aspect. And so on these serious points, I'd like to think if my dogs ever went missing, a vet would scan my dog. We know that the numbers have gone from 58% to 90% when they're chipped. But we also know that pricing's gone up. There's puppy profiteering. I know that my own experience in something with regards to whippets, who are not the most popular breed, doubled in that time frame. And worse still, puppy smuggling. Now, I know the Minister is working hard on dealing with this, and she's pointed before, when I've raised this question about pet fished, how to protect yourself when you're buying these pets. But most people are good people. They do their diligent research. And we need the vets and the industry to help support our fight in dealing with theft and loss. I'm completely open to the fact that there may be unintended consequences. I'd like to see the consultation really get underneath what is going on here, both in bringing with the government, the vets, the veterinary associations, the rescuers, and of course the public, because I think there is a heart here where we can all agree as Parliament, no matter which side of the house you're on, no matter which industry you're in, receiver or carer, this can be resolved. And for that, I'd like the Minister to consider this, to provide some dates of when this is likely to come forward, and hopefully pass these two motions.
Jane Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a great pleasure to speak under your chairmanship. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent North, for securing this really important debate today. Pet theft reform is something I've been campaigning on for quite a while now. Indeed, we had a debate last year secured by my honourable friend, the member for Ipswich, around pet theft, and many points were made that I think the government is attempting to deal with during this Parliament. To tackle this horrific crime that impacts our constituents so fundamentally, we need to use every tool available to us. And these two petitions, microchipping, the rules on microchipping on databases and on scanning, these are absolutely crucial to getting this right. Fern of Fern's Law spent 6 years as a lost dog away from her family. Had a vet been obliged to check her microchip, she had sought veterinary treatment in that time, and we know she would have made it home more quickly. It is common sense, and I think many petitions that come with such popularity from the general public do have common sense at their core. Having a single database to identify a lost or stolen dog is basic common sense. If your dog is stolen, being able to add a marker to that single database to flag the pet as stolen is common sense. And sadly, when a dog is presented to be euthanized, establishing that the correct and rightful owner is the person making that request. And I would add, I think there's a further debate to be had about whether any euthanizing of a healthy pet by a vet should be an option available, whether a surrender to a rescue would be a much better way to tackle unwanted pets, because no healthy dog should be euthanized. And I know vets have an incredibly difficult time having to euthanize healthy dogs. It is utterly barbaric pet theft, and as we've heard from so many people who've spoken today, it is an urgent matter that we reform pet theft. Every day I read another story of a devastated owner who's lost a beloved family member. In recent local elections, this crime is becoming such a concern to people. I met especially older constituents, female constituents. They are now too nervous to take their dogs out, certainly towards the end of the day. And I was talking to them to try and get dog walking groups together. Obviously in the pandemic that's been an issue that has been difficult for people. But we must deal with this. It is so important to our constituents. As we've heard from my right honourable friend, the member for Chingford and Wood Green, there have been amendments tabled to the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. New clause 15 would make Fern's Law a reality, and I will be signing that amendment. We do need action now. I've spoken to the Lord Chancellor about pet theft a couple of weeks ago. I've spoken to DEFRA ministers, to the Home Office, and I am reassured that government is absolutely committed to doing this, and I really welcome the government setting up the Pet Theft Task Force that is going to look at all the issues around pet theft and report in the autumn. I thank the Minister here today, the Honourable Member for Banbury, because I know I talk to her a lot about various animal welfare issues, but I know she is a real animal lover, and I do know there are so many people who support this. In conclusion, I think how these reforms happen is not important, whether it happens via amendments to the current bill, whether it's a separate act. It just needs to happen, and it needs to happen immediately, as quickly as government time will allow. Finally, I just want to thank everybody who has campaigned for Fern's Law and Tuck's Law, and every single person who signs petitions, who writes to their members of Parliament. It is so important we are kept informed, and we keep the pressure up to get something done, to get positive action. And I thank government for listening and reacting to that today. Thank you.
Now go virtual. James Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And these are two very, very important petitions, but essentially deal with the same matter. And it's this legal fact that there is no legal requirement on veterinarians, local authorities or highways agencies to scan dog or cat microchips in any circumstances. And both petitions are variations of legal problems that flow from that fact. Now, I will confine my remarks in the main to Tuck's Law for some reasons I will outline in a second. But in terms of Fern's Law, which I fully support, I won't add to what other honourable members have said, but I don't think the Minister will be unsuspecting of what I'm about to say, in that Fern's Law calls for the introduction, I asked for it to be made compulsory to scan and check all microchips to reunite stolen dogs and cats. Gizmo's law is requesting that similar legislation be brought in for deceased cats, for deceased pets. And I would urge my honourable friend, and I know she's the most fantastic minister, if I can say that on these issues, that Gizmo's law be given due consideration at the earliest opportunity, which I know I say to the minister every single opportunity I meet her in and outside of the chamber. But Gizmo's law is an important part of the animal legislation that this government, I believe, should be bringing forward. Now, like many other members, I am a dog owner. My friend is Bertie, my 16-month-old black lab. And I don't know what I'd do without Bertie, but Tug was a 16-month-old rescue dog, so the same age as my dog. And sadly, Tug was destroyed on the 22nd of December 2017. This debate comes along from that event, that sacrifice. And Tug was in a position where he was not scanned prior to euthanasia, and his rescue backups were not contacted or notified of his death, even though he had full rescue backup registered on his microchip and the original database. When one considers that fact, it only required the microchip to be scanned for the rescue backup to be contacted, for Tug to be saved. I think that highlights the importance of this legislation. Now, I have worked with Sue Williams, Dawn Ashley, Dominic Dyer. I introduced a private member's bill in the last session, which sadly fell, on Tug's law. But I decided to make the final remarks, or the remarks I want to make about Tug's law, their words, because they are the passionate campaigners who've driven this campaign forward. They are the people who've gone and got over 100,000 signatures in their desire to protect animals. So what is a rescue backup registration on a microchip? Rescue organisations register their details on the original database as a secondary contact as part of the adoption contract. In times of vulnerability, the secondary contact is there to protect the animal from being unnecessarily euthanised and to alert the veterinarian that an alternative is in place. What is rescue backup? Once an animal is adopted and rehomed, the rescue remains a presence in their lives, offering rescue backup to the adopter for the duration of the pet's life. The rescue is available for advice, and should the adopter no longer be able to care for the animal, the rescue will support them and find an alternative new home. And I suspect for these reasons, and why I'm delighted that Tug's law has therefore been included in the government's action plan for animals, and I thank the Minister and the government for that. In finishing my remarks, I would just like to point out some concerns that the Tug's Law campaign have. I know the Minister is aware of these, but I think they bear repeating. The Tug's Law campaign, as ever, continue to lobby government to ensure that all microchip details are confirmed, including the rescue backup contact details for the rescue organisation on the original database prior to the euthanasia of a healthy or treatable animal. The Tug's Law campaign also requests that any identified rescue backup details, once confirmed, are registered on veterinarian practice databases, including the rescue organisation's contact details. And should the animal ever be in a vulnerable position, the veterinarians agree to communicate with the rescue or second contact prior to the euthanasia of the healthy or treatable animal. There is a concern, obviously we've heard that there's been real positive steps with DEFRA, the RCVS and BVA to prevent unnecessary euthanasia in dogs. However, the Tug's campaign is dedicated to ensuring that all lives are not unnecessarily lost. They consider that the commitment in its current form and as guidance does not go far enough. The Tug's Law campaign believe that the omission of the word treatable in the recent change in the RCVS Code of Conduct leaves many animals still at risk, and whilst there is appreciation that the BVA has concerns regarding the levels of intervention that the veterinarian profession is willing to undertake, when the life of any animal is at risk, then those steps should be taken. This is a subject that I could speak on for a long time, but it is a subject rooted in common sense, rooted in legality, rooted in a desire of all our constituents to ensure that no healthy animal, like Tug, like Bertie, like the pets honourable members have talked about, are ever for any reason, whether that be through theft, through loss, are ever in a position where they lose their lives through no fault of their own, when a rescue backup is in place to help them, to protect them, to ensure they continue to be the constant companions that we all value and treasure as part of our everyday lives. Thank you very much.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, and I'd like to thank the member for Stoke-on-Trent North for leading this debate from the Petitions Committee. It's particularly good to see him in his place, and also like to thank the Minister for being here today, and also for recently visiting my North West Durham constituency, which was great to see her there. Spice, Sam, Tess and Cookie were the pets that I grew up with at home when I was a child, and it's quite clear that they are far more than just animals. They are family members too, as is attested to by my visit to Bishop Ian Ramsey Primary School in Medhamsley on Friday, when I actually spoke to the children in Year 6 there about this berry issue. I won't regurgitate too much of the speeches of the members for Strangford, Chingford and Wood Green, Bosworth, Wolverhampton North East and for Bury North, who've all really hammered home the key points that want to be made. But I would like to pay tribute to the Far Place Animal Rescue Centre in my constituency, who do so much good work. On Ferns Law, it seems pretty clear to me. We've got compulsory microchipping. Compulsory scanning is the obvious next step, because without it, you've not got compulsory checking, and therefore you've got a weak system. And without that, how can we possibly move towards the compulsory microchipping of cats? It's an absolute no-brainer, as the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North said, and it should be clearly made obligatory as quickly as possible. Regarding Tuck's Law, I thought it was particularly nice to hear from my honourable friend, the member for Bury North, on that. It's, you know, with his 16-year-old dog, which is the same age as Tuck was when he was put down. It seems to be absolutely sensible to me to have a proper compulsory scan before destruction, and while the strengthened guidance is welcome, I'd like the government to have a proper look at what else can be done in that space. As many members have mentioned, it's quite clear that lockdown has made this issue even more important, with the cost of dogs being driven through the roof over the last few months. And it's also that coming out of lockdown where we might even see that destruction of dogs potentially also being driven. So it's quite clear that on both of those counts, lockdown's made it even worse, and which is why it's so important that the government acts. And I hope they'll speak to my honourable friends, the member for Ipswich and the member for Chingford and Wood Green, about what can possibly be done there. It's also clear that the 16 different databases at the moment is quite clearly not fit for purpose. If we're doing it for cars, we should do it for people's animals, which mean a lot more to them than so many other things in our lives. So I'd just like to conclude by saying I really welcome the petitioners. I know this is a huge issue for many of my constituents, and not just on this, but pet theft's been a major issue. Durham Constabulary have raised it with me personally several times over the last few months during lockdown. So I really hope that we get some action and some positive words from the Minister on this today. Thank you.
We're now going virtual to the SNP spokesperson, Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr. Pritchard. It's an absolute pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. So can I thank the Right Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North for calling this important debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee and for setting the scene for us all in such detail from the outset. Before I contribute today, can I declare an interest as the proud owner of Rossi the rescue dog, who won 4th place in Westminster Dog of the Year a few years back. We're so proud of Rossi. And I'm also the current chair of the All-Party Dog Advisory Welfare Group, AppDog. I wish to additionally thank, from the bottom of my heart, the 538 constituents of mine who signed the petitions that we are debating today. And like others, can I express thanks to Mark Abraham, OBE, Dr. Daniel Allen, the Tuck's Law and the Ferns Law campaigners, alongside Debbie Matthews for their invaluable work campaigning on these important matters. And thank you to all of our honourable members and right honourable members who took part today and spoke so passionately on behalf of their constituents' views, including the honourable member for Wolverhampton, and those who spoke about their own pets, to the Honourable Member for Bosworth, the Honourable Member for North West Durham, Honourable Member for Bury North, who's done so much already, as I'm aware, on Tuck's Law, The Honourable Member for Strangford, whose wife I'm aware is heavily involved in dog welfare and rescue, and also the Honourable Member for Morley and Outwood, who spoke so poignantly about the loss of her own pet Shadow, highlighting to us that animals are sentient beings and very much part of our families. Last Friday, I was proud to visit the South Lanarkshire Rescue SSPCA Centre and to speak with their CEO, Kirsten Campbell, alongside Mike Flynn and other staff who work there. Not only was it a privilege to see firsthand the lengths that staff and volunteers go to in order to treat and to care for the dogs, cats and other little animals in desperate need of rehoming, but it was great to hear so much more about the work they're doing through links groups to highlight the link between animal abuse, domestic violence and other social issues, and also through their education programme. I was interested to hear that local shelters often have to meet up the costs of animals seized until their court date, costing hundreds of thousands of pounds, and particularly difficult in this pandemic to raise funds. So much more must be done in legislation with regards to temporary refuge. In my visit to the SSPCA, it was also clear to see the difficulty that they face in reuniting pets whose details haven't been kept up to date with their rightful owners. By acting on the petitions debated here today, and by firstly making microchip scanning mandatory for vets at a pet's first consultation, and secondly by creating a centralised database for microchip companies, this House would be taking a vital step towards ensuring pets are given every opportunity possible to be reunited with their owners wherever they are lost or stolen. It's impossible to overstate the importance of the urgent action required on this matter. The pandemic has seen a surge in pet ownership, with over 3 million pets acquired since the start of the first lockdown, most of them cats and dogs. Sadly, this rise in demand has tragically been accompanied by an unprecedented rise in pet theft too. If we add this to the picture that 99% of pet owners consider their pets to be family members, and yet only 1 in 5 stolen pets are ever returned to their families, we soon see the immense distress that the current gaps in the distinct and worrying lack of microchipping scanning is causing to families and to pets across all of our constituencies. Compulsory scanning at first visit would also act as a significant deterrent to pet theft, with thieves reluctant to sell on stolen pets for fear of compulsory scanning triggering a potential investigation or prosecution. And the real tragedy of this issue for me is that most of us who have pets assume that a vet practice would scan our pets' microchip should they go missing. The public assume this is already in place. A Twitter poll published by Dr. Daniel Allen found that almost 4,000 voters, 98% of pet owners, expect vets to check their pets' microchip should they be stolen. When we read government statements and information posted on microchip websites boasting that microchipping our pets will increase their chances of being reunited, we believe them, and yet very often due to current gaps in scanning and data collection, this is just sadly not the case. One of the most common reasons cited against mandating vets to check pets' microchips on their first visits is that it would take too long to scan and check the microchips, and that this is not the vet's job to do. However, it is much more likely that someone else within the practice would be able to do this, such as a member of support staff, making sure that vet's time is not taken up inadvertently. So I welcome the commitments made by the government in its action plan for animal welfare, particularly with regard to the introduction of compulsory cat microchipping and its explicit reference to reforming the current system of collating animal microchip data to prevent instances where pets have been euthanised without the express consent of their rightful owners. And I would echo the comments of the honourable members, including the honourable member for Chingford and Woodford Green, who has highlighted that we must give vets every opportunity to succeed in reuniting those lost pets with their owners and identify and prosecute instances of pet theft causing such harm to everyone involved. We must take this issue forward collectively across the Parliament. I'm sure it has cross-party support, and I very much look forward to the Minister's response today.
We now move to the opposition spokesperson, Luke Pollard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard, and thank you to the member for Stoke-on-Trent North who introduced this debate so well. There's a good cross-party support amongst all the speakers today that action needs to be taken. And I fear that it is déjà vu for the Minister, because across a number of animal welfare debates, there have been examples where the opposition members and the government members have all agreed that action needs to be taken. We've also nearly always agreed that the action that needs to be taken would be relatively simple, relatively low cost, and would have a substantially positive impact on the constituents that we represent. Which puts the Minister in a bad situation again, because she'll have to explain why this still has not happened, Oggins here. Because we are facing, I think, a relatively slew of parliamentary legislation around animal welfare at the moment. A real piggery of parliamentary business. There's lots of it. However, in that lots of it, there's also a lot missing. And I think what I want to hear from the Minister in a moment is where items need primary legislation, a clarity that that will be included in that primary legislation, but where they don't, and I believe largely in the cases we're talking about today, we won't need primary legislation, Mr Pritchard, to put those into action. That secondary legislation can be brought forward, and brought forward swiftly. Because the danger of this debate is that we can all sit here and agree with it, but it requires the government to act upon it. These petitions are well supported. 230,000 signatures on these petitions, including 436 from Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport. And I know that people really feel passionately about this. The Kept Animals Bill, which is the flagship piece of animal welfare legislation that the Minister is bringing forward, I think offers a chance to tidy up and clear up a number of the problems that remain on animal welfare. I know that she has looked carefully at Labour's Animal Welfare Manifesto and included a number of those points in the legislation that she's bringing forward, and I'm grateful for her for doing so, as I know that backbench members from her own party will be grateful for ministers listening to their campaigns in this respect here. I'm also grateful for the Minister for taking time last week to sit down with myself and the Shadow DEFRA team to talk through what's in the bill, and importantly what's not in the bill, and what could potentially be put in the bill at a later stage. And that's really where secondary legislation comes into this. Some people watching this debate will not really be excited by secondary legislation. The truth is that many people in this House are also not particularly excited by secondary legislation. But it does enable the government to change the rules on legislation that's already been passed relatively simply and largely with cross-party support. And I would encourage the Minister to do so in the two cases that we've got here. Across this debate, a number of honourable members have spoken about the loss of their own pets and what it means to them. The honourable member for Morley and Outwood spoke about Shadow and the loss that she had when her dog was missing. My own experience in this, and the Minister will know this, about losing Bumble Snarf, named after Bumblebee from Transformers and Snarf from the Thundercats, obviously, when I was a little boy, not knowing where the cat was, not knowing when they were coming back, not knowing if the cat was in distress or in pain. These are commonly held concerns that people right across the country will have. Compulsory microchipping makes a lot of sense. It's hugely popular amongst the people we represent. But it does seem to be only part of a solution. If we require compulsory microchipping, but we don't require compulsory checking of the microchip once it's in that particular animal. And that's where I think, throughout this debate, we have effectively, without saying it, made the case that microchipping is good. Microchipping is positive, and microchipping has real benefits. But for the system to deliver on the promise that was made, including from the Secretary of State, who said way back in April 2016, microchipping will not only reunite people with their lost or stolen pets, but will also help tackle the growing problem of strays roaming the streets and relieve the burden placed on animal charities and local authorities. Well, he was right then, and he's right now, but the system needs to work from end to end. And at the moment, there are sizable gaps in that system. Microchipping is cheap and easy procedure. It's safe for cats, dogs and other animals. It's permanent and cost effective. But it needs to work. And that's where I think the challenge is for the Minister to convince herself, her government colleagues and her officials that this is action worth taking. I find myself in the awkward position of agreeing wholeheartedly with the member from Chingford and Woodford Green. And as an opposition member, this is something that I pride myself in not always doing. But actually, he raises this fantastic point when he talks. I'll be talking to myself considerably in the mirror later, don't worry. But he raises a really clear point about what is a first order issue and what is a second order issue. I don't know a single voter in Plymouth who would say that animal welfare is anything other than a first order issue. And we, as parliamentarians in any party, need to make that case to ministers to use the parliamentary opportunities, both legislative and in the secondary legislation via statutory instruments, to make that case. I think his case for amending the police bill, a bill that I'm not a huge fan of, to put in a point about pet theft is a good one. It's something that the Honourable Member for Tottenham and myself has argued from Labour's point of view as well, and I think there would be cross-party support for elements of that, because pet theft is an increasingly difficult and stubborn problem. The pandemic has made it considerably worse. The demand for animals, the company they provide, I think is something that we all recognise. But the legislation needs to be flexible enough to catch up with that demand and the problems that it is causing. And I think there is a real chance to do something on pet theft. I don't have high hopes for a task force. I want to see the action, and I think we know what needs to be done. I don't think we need a delaying tactic to help us delay and get there slower, but we know what needs to be done, and that needs to happen shortly, about where it comes from. There is a real, I think, support for the action that we've heard of about microchipping cats. As the Honourable Member for Strangford remarked in his speech, that there's still 2.6 million owned cats in the UK that have not been microchipped. That's a quarter of all pet cats. Now, cats, as we know, have a mind of their own. However, microchipping your cat is, I think, is a really important part of having that bond, knowing that if the cat goes out and continues going there, that there will be an opportunity for that cat to be reunited. And I think there's a good case for more work there. There's cross-party support for this. The government's consultation showed that as well. This should just happen. This should just happen. When it comes to Fern's Law, I think there is a good support for what happens in Fern's Law. I don't share the same concerns that have been raised by a number of veterinary colleagues on this area that was mentioned by Member for Stoke-on-Trent North at the start. I think there is always time to ensure that the animal that the person, the veterinary that has been dealt with at the vets is the animal that is supposed to be there. The owner is the one that's supposed to be there. And I think that taking time to ensure that the animal is properly scanned is the right one. I noticed in the government's consultation response, or petition response, forgive me, to the petition when it was originally went over 100, triggered that response, that the government said this is an area that is largely done by self-regulation at the moment, via best practice. I spent 5 years working for ABTA, the Travel Association. I support self-regulation. I support industries looking after themselves. But on this one here, I have to say not enough is being done. And I think it is a reasonable request for veterinary businesses to require the scanning of animals when it comes into their surgeries. And I think that is something that I would ask the industry to look again at, because I think there is strong support for Fern's Law in that respect. I also want to pick up a point that was made by the member for Wolverhampton North East that talks about common sense being at the core of any good policy. I agree with her on that point, and that does raise real concerns around the databases. 16 different databases on this area really shows not a market working effectively and efficiently, but a broken system, a broken market. Because within those 16 databases that we've spoken about, that don't often speak to each other, there are also those bogus websites. Those websites deliberately set up by scammers designed to take the money off pet owners wanting to do the right thing and register their animal, but without that backup that comes from the certainty that if anything were to happen, that's something we looked at. And I would encourage the Minister to look carefully at where that database is at the moment, because I think that whole system is not working, and I think she would enjoy cross-party support if she were to take action in that respect, albeit recommending that there is a quick action from those companies dealing with it already, and if not a voluntary action, a government action. The Tux Law petition that animals ask that microchips are always scanned before euthanising a healthy animal also is a no-brainer. It must take place. It is something that is so obviously, apparently wrong with the current system. And I would encourage the Minister to equally look at swiftly implementing Tux Law in whatever legislative route she can via secondary or primary legislation. That leads me very briefly onto the Honourable Member for Bury North. He and I share a real passion for wanting to see Gizmo's law actually put into law. I have to say to him that it is frustrating for him and for me to hear that this being skipped over at each and every debate, and I know that that Helena Abrams, Gizmo's owner, shares that deliberate passion to want to see real change, and I'd encourage the Minister to continue to listen to the Honourable Member for Bury North, but to act upon what he is saying, because he says something that is very sensible in this respect when it comes to this. Finally, Mr Pritchard, I think there's There's an important bit about access to vets that we need to talk about in this debate, because at each of our contributions we have made the case that accessing veterinary care is available. It is something that when an animal is taken to a vet, that a certain action should be taken as a result of that. But there are many people for whom access to a vet is something they cannot afford. It is a luxury that they cannot afford for themselves. And we really do need to look at the affordability of access to veterinary care to make sure that everyone can access the proper services of a vet in this respect. Again, another point from Labour's Animal Welfare Manifesto that I'd encourage the Minister to cut and paste. I think that would be popular when it comes to it. When it comes to animal welfare, it helps to remember that doing the right thing for animals is almost always in the best interests of humans as well. And that is where I think there is a strong support from all sides of this House for the measures outlined in these two petitions. I would like to say to the Honourable Member for Bosworth, I'm a big fan of his Instagram and his pictures of his whippets along the same way. There needs to be a parliamentary caucus for parliamentary lukes, and indeed we have a small one here as well in terms of this. I think the point raised by the Honourable Member for North West Durham about the potential increase of destruction of animals as we come out of lockdown and restrictions is another good point that, although doesn't easily fit into a solution, certainly helps identify an emerging problem that will get bigger and bigger and bigger, indeed with more animals potentially presenting with behavioural difficulties because of the certain on and off again presence of their owners and their families in this respect. I'm grateful for the opportunity to set out the positive and I think cross-party case for action on this, and I look forward to the Minister hopefully giving us the good news that she'll be taking action and not just delaying this further. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Pritchard, and it's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, I think, for the first time. It's also a great pleasure to thank the honourable gentleman from Stoke-on-Trent North and indeed all those who signed these petitions which led to the debate this afternoon. I would like to reassure everybody that animal welfare is definitely a first-order issue for this government. We all recognise the valuable contribution that our pets can make to our lives. We've heard sad stories this afternoon of Shadow and of Bumble Snarf, but we've also heard very heartwarming stories from Bosworth, for example, and indeed that of the honourable gentleman from Strangford, who feels his dog greets him more warmly than his wife. Last month we introduced a bill to recognise that animals are sentient beings. Earlier this month we introduced a bill that will enhance protection for kept animals, including provisions on puppy smuggling and livestock worrying, and introduce bans on the export of live animals for slaughter and fattening, and also put controls on keeping primates as pets. I would like to assure everyone that action is being taken. There is a long list of animal welfare issues to get through. We are working through it. We are keen not to delay. Some of this can be dealt with in primary legislation. Some, as the honourable gentleman opposite reminds me, and he knows that I am a great fan of secondary legislation, can be dealt with in secondary legislation. And some can be dealt with by non-legislative means. And it is important that we use every tool in our toolbox. I know honourable members and right honourable members are impatient to get this done. It is important that we do that, and I'm not trying to hold anything up in this respect, but it is also important that we do it properly, we do it after full consultation with the public, and that we bring the veterinary profession with us, or indeed encourage them to move with us on this, because as many honourable members have said, much depends on them. So we are committed to microchipping. Our action plan for animal welfare reaffirmed this. So compulsory cat microchipping will be coming in. We've consulted on this already. Over 33,000 people took the trouble to respond to that consultation. We're working up the detailed proposals at the moment, and we will respond fully on that in the autumn, following which I'm quite sure that honourable members will have a great deal to say in our response, and we will definitely be introducing the necessary regulation next year. The Action Plan for Animal Welfare also sets out our ambition to introduce further microchipping reforms in relation to the database systems. And on Tuck's law specifically, steps have already been taken to give greater assurance that the microchip database information is checked whenever a healthy dog is presented for euthanasia. So turning specifically to Tuck's law, I would also like to pay tribute to Sue, Dawn and Dominic, who are the driving forces behind this campaign, for their tireless efforts to highlight the plight of Tuck and other dogs who were put down when an alternative home might well be available. The Honourable Lady from East Kilbride also mentioned the very dark side of domestic abuse which can underlie some of these tragic cases. We've listened carefully to the campaign's concerns and worked hard with the veterinary profession to develop an approach which has won approval from all sides. The Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons has amended its guidance in May, so when a healthy dog is presented to be put down, the vet is now required to scan the microchip and check the details on the microchip database. This will enable them to consider whether anyone else has an interest in the animal, like a rehoming centre, who might well be able to prevent the animal being put down. The guidance underpins the Code of Professional Conduct for vets. Any vet practising in the UK is required to adhere to it. Notification of the change to the guidance was sent to every registered vet and was very well publicised in sector publications. I'm very grateful to the veterinary profession for their positive engagement on this. I heard calls from, not least the Honourable Gentleman from Stoke-on-Trent North, that pets obtained during the pandemic might be given up as life returns to normal. And I would like to reassure the Honourable Gentleman and other members that we're monitoring this issue extremely closely as we hope we come out of the pandemic. However, information received only last week from the Association of Dog and Cat Homes suggests that dog and cat rescue centres have actually seen a decline of animals being given up for adoption and are currently on average below 60% full. So in brief, we think that we've dealt with this issue by working closely with the veterinary profession, but we will continue to keep the matter, as has been suggested by many members this afternoon and the campaign, very closely under review as we come out of the pandemic. On Fern's law, we recognise very clearly the emotional upset and trauma which a loss of a much-loved pet can cause. And we will continue to work to take action on pet theft. We set up the government's pet theft task force not at all to kick the issue down the road, as the Honourable Gentleman opposite suggested, but in fact, as the Right Honourable Gentleman from Chingford and Wood Green suggested, because this because this is a multi-departmental issue. The Right Honourable Gentleman has, if I may say so, knocked around government for some time now and is aware that we need DEFRA, the MOJ and the Home Office to work together to ensure that this issue is right at the top of the agenda. The task force will report by the end of July. Officials are working on the recommended actions at the moment, and in the autumn we will following the recommendations of the task force, we will work on the legislative and non-legislative measures which can help deal with pet theft. These items which we are working on very much include stopping cash payments, for example, which was mentioned by the Right Honourable Gentleman, creating a new pet theft offence or offences where necessary, and measures on the compulsory scanning of microchips. As the Honourable Lady from Wolverhampton North East said, every tool needs to be used in our response to this. Fern's law very much formed part of the consultation which we carried out earlier this year. It's worth reminding colleagues that the compulsory microchipping of dogs was primarily brought in to reduce the number of dogs which needed to be rehomed or put down because their keepers couldn't be traced. In this, it has been really successful, with an increased reunification rate for strays since the introduction of the measures. The routine scanning of strays is clearly helpful, and there is a strong imperative to do that on animal welfare grounds. The veterinary profession already recommends that vets scan cats and dogs on first presentation. to make sure that the animal is correctly identified when checked against the database. And they recommend that at regular check-ups this is done again. Where the checks raise a concern that the animal might have been lost or stolen, vets have procedures in place to handle this. All of us have a shared goal to reunite pets with their owners. Vets play an important part in the system, and it will take whole system approach to deal with this, including, but not limited to, microchipping animals, effective databases, and keepers ensuring that their details are kept up to date. So, in brief, and I will watch the progress of the Right Honourable Gentleman's amendment closely, and I know that he's been in touch with the Lord Chancellor about this, we are considering the consultation responses on Ferns Law and will put forward our proposals this autumn. On the single database calls, I've listened carefully to the arguments put forward, not least by the Honourable Gentleman for North West Durham, whose constituency I was very pleased to visit, for a single database. We should recognise that database operators are commercial enterprises that offer a range of services and provide some level of choice for pet owners, but I'm sure that significant improvements can be made to the current system to address the issues of concern. These include considering a single point of access for all databases, which from the user perspective may in fact be very much like having a single database. We are working on this urgently, and once again I will come back to honourable members in the autumn to give the response to the consultation. These improvements will very much help to support the principles behind the scanning campaigns that we've discussed today. On Gizmo's legacy, and again I pay tribute to the Honourable Gentleman from Bury North, who I'm afraid I now refer to normally as Gizmo. Colleagues have also raised the issue of scanning dead cats killed by the roadside, which is the subject of this campaign. Poor Gizmo was disposed of at landfill without his microchip being scanned and his owner informed. Colleagues know that I myself lost a cat, Twilight, we still have his brother, Midnight, to a road traffic accident, and I have enormous sympathy with the aims of this campaign. All Highways England contracts include a requirement to identify and inform owners of dead cats and dogs found by the roadside. The charity Cats Matter, which does tremendous work with local authorities to encourage scanning, tells me that all but 2 local authorities, and I'm happy to name them, have scanning procedures in place. Tower Hamlets and Westminster, I believe. I believe that still more can be done to develop a consistent and effective approach based on best practice across all local authorities. I have superb examples of best practice available to all colleagues who wish to chat to me about it afterwards. And I would encourage members to be in touch with their local authority to check that best practice is carried out across the nation. I would like to reassure honourable members that we will have more to say on this as well when we respond to the consultation exercise later in the year. The Honourable Gentleman does not talk about Gizmo in vain. So, in brief, I hope, Mr Chairman, that you and colleagues are reassured that the Government is committed to addressing these issues to ensure that the microchipping regime is as effective as it possibly can be.
Jonathan Gullis to wind up.
Thank you very much, Mr Pritchard. I think it's once again a pleasure to be doing a Petitions Committee debate where there is certainty, unity across all the benches of all members, and I would like to thank all members for their fantastic contributions. Obviously, we're proud, as members of Parliament here, we're proud of our dogs, and we have obviously Westminster Dog of the Year, which I'm sure those of us who are pet owners are delighted will be doing. I look forward to knocking off the Honourable Member for East Kilbride and Strathaven's first place with Bella and Bailey. And I'm also delighted to know that the Honourable Member for Bosworth, whilst he is shamelessly smouldering in his Instagram posts, is does actually have a fan. But to hear that he does have a fan from the member for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport means I've just unfollowed him, because I don't want to be associated with someone who's I can't match the smouldering look quite with, and shamelessly use my pets to get likes on Instagram. That's obviously the trick that I need to learn from. But I think I think everything was really well summed up across the whole plethora of this debate, from the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green, who I think made the point that animals absolutely are not just property. They're far more than that. We've all talked about our own experiences. I certainly know Bella and Bailey mean far more to me. And there are members from Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork want to see things taking place, because very sadly in my constituency, a scumbag called Malachy Dougherty was sentenced to 27 weeks in prison, having stolen 2 dogs outside M&S. And I just think 27 weeks isn't really strong enough. It doesn't really send a strong enough message, really. And a 14-year-old accomplice is sadly still on the run. Hopefully he'll be brought before a court soon. But Malachy, who, I don't really want him back in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork, to be quite frank, because he hopefully finds a new home in a field with a tent maybe, so he can be surrounded by those animals and maybe trample over that tent to remind him what animals are like. So ultimately, this is the problem that we face. We have these pet theft task force, which I know we're all waiting to see the results from. We have to make sure there's stricter laws in place. We have to make sure there's proper consequences for those who do harm to lives, because Freya Woodall, one of the people from Fern's Law, it's now over 2 years since she lost her beloved dog, and the fact that her children have sadly had to seek, she was telling me, mental health support because of the long-term impact that losing that family member has had upon them, shows that clearly more needs to be done. I absolutely believe as well. I want to thank obviously the contributions again from the Minister for, yes, there is an awful lot going through DEFRA at the moment. I'm sure that it's been a hectic time on top of everything that's been going on with the global pandemic, but the sooner we act and the quicker we get these things done, the quicker that maintains public confidence in this government, which I have full confidence in, and it shows that we are listening to the constituents, because ultimately dealing with pet theft, dealing with microchipping of animals and the scanning of it may seem small indeed to some members of the public, but actually goes a massive long way to improving the lives and outcomes. And as members of Parliament, it's actually this work that's probably far more important in actually helping our constituents day to day than in other things that we might think are much grander when we're in the chamber talking about sort of convoluted issues. This is the stuff, the bread and butter stuff, that I was elected on by the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork to change and deliver on. And obviously the member for Morley and Outward talking about shadow has touched all of us, and I obviously my thoughts are with her, obviously, and the fact that that's so long ago yet stays with her shows just how important that is. And obviously with animal sentience being brought already forward by the government, I think it plays perfectly into what the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green was saying, that they are, as we say, more than just pets. And we have to take in the distress that's caused to these animals when they are taken. Some animals, sadly, are so distressed that they end up having health ailments themselves, or so scared that it creates water in the lungs. I was told by Dr. Daniel Allen about how people had, obviously, pets when they reunited with the pet was never the same, and in fact ended up dying because of heart strain and conditions due to the disgusting attempts of breeding day in, day out, as well as obviously the abuse that animal suffers in terrible conditions. We love our pets, we love our animals, we always want to do much more. This is an easy win for government, I have no doubt about that. We're united across the House. All we're waiting for is the ability to walk through division lobbies or give it the nod through the statutory instruments. Whatever is needed, let's get this thing done. Let's get it done quickly. Let's give confidence to the pet owners of many people across the United Kingdom, and I look forward to seeing the Minister bring those recommendations forward in the autumn.
The question is that this House has considered E-petitions 3010 and 3025 relating to microchipping of pets. As many other opinions say aye.
Aye.
I'll continue no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 6:15. If honourable members could observe social distancing while exiting, and can I thank